Good evening, all. Welcome to Intersociety weekly webinar series. To enlighten us today on artificial intelligence tech startups, we have Dr. Antony Satyadas, Managing Partner, CEO, Co-founder, Innovation Incubator Group of Companies. I am Elizabeth George, MC for today. As we are about to begin, I kindly request all the participants to turn off your audio and video. Participants are requested to type in the questions in the chat box, which will be taken for discussion at the end of the session. Thank you for your kind cooperation and attention. Now, I invite Ajina Karim to give welcome address.
Elizabeth, I don't think Gina has come. You can take over.
Okay. Intersociety weekly webinar series is jointly organized by IEEE Kerala session, the Institution of Engineers, Computer Society of India Trivandrum Chapter, PMI, Internet Society Trivandrum, VMFT, LMAG, IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Kerala Chapter EMBS. On behalf of all these chapters, I invite all the eminent personalities present here for the webinar series. I formally welcome Dr. Antony Satyadas, who is the CEO, co-founder, and Innovation Incubator Group of Companies. I also welcome Shanti ma'am, Harindralal sir, and all other personalities who is present over here. So I request Dr. Shanti Ravindran, Motorola Solutions, Singapore Private Limited, to introduce the speaker.
Hi, thank you, Elizabeth. It's my great pleasure to welcome Antony Satyadas, my classmate from Electrical Engineering 84 of College of Engineering, Trivandrum. We in the EE 84 batch are very proud of what Antony is doing. I just want to introduce Antony personally to you. He was my classmate, and he was one of the very few boys I spoke to, I remember, when I was in college. He was a very outgoing person, always bubbly, full of ideas, and it was always fun to be around when he was there. Son will attest to it. So when we left, Antony was always interested in going to the States, I remember, and he did go there. And I remember he went somewhere else first, and then he said he is in the States. And then we found out he's in Hyderabad, and then he said he is in one of the states. But he did reach the States eventually, and we are very happy to see that he's bringing something of all that he learned back to his hometown, which is what we all want to do, hope to do. When I talked to Antony over the years, one of my few classmates I kept in touch with, he was always very well grounded in his knowledge, and I'm sure he brings that to the tech startups here. He's also a very resilient individual, and that is probably one of the qualities that all startups need as well. So with that, I'm eagerly waiting to listen to Antony's speech. Antony, please go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Shanti, for the kind words. It is kind of exciting to be here. I feel almost like homecoming, many familiar faces. Just to qualify, I'm not a doctor, just to be clear, but I'm really excited. And I think Harindralal, I mean, we call him Annan. It's an amazing thing you're doing here in bringing together different associations and societies to a common platform, right? And to share, things we have learned over the last few decades. I think that is very exciting. So when I thought about what to share, obviously, I did attend a few of these sessions before, even like Shanti's session, Ambiga, and a few others. There are a lot of eminent personalities who have been sharing their knowledge already here. And so I thought, maybe and I know that there are people who have been sharing about startups, and there are other presenters coming up later on too in that regard. So I thought maybe, given what is happening in the industry around artificial intelligence and some of my experiences around startups, maybe that is a topic to share. So with that in mind, there are really three things I would like to focus on. Um, One is all about, many people, some of my classmates, juniors, others, friends of, family, etc. Often they come and ask me the question, "Hey, my son is talking about startup. What do I do?" Or, "I was in the Gulf for 30 years. I'm retiring and coming home. What should I do?" Right? So I know in this audience, there are probably many entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you've been sharing your wisdom to many. But I thought it is important to touch on that briefly, and then talk a bit more around the value, how do you make it real, right? When you think about artificial intelligence. So what is it really, why it matters, and a whole bunch of use cases you can think about, right? Where many companies have already been successful, and we will talk more about that. And then how do you get started? So I would think that I would like to spend probably half an hour through all of these, spending most of the time on the topic, item 2, and then really, open it up for questions and make it interactive, right? After spending this half an hour, all right? So when people think about startups, and there is always that question, what is the purpose, right? Is it that my kid is graduated, is trying to figure out what to do, versus I'm getting retired and I would like to get started on something, or I'm already an entrepreneur in certain domain and I'd like to see what can be leveraged, what is emerging out there. So there are different reasons why you would think about it, right? So, but then the purpose is important. But then pretty soon the question is going to be, what is the role you want to play, right? Are you looking at it as a founder with some seed capital, or you just want to look for investment opportunities in this space? Maybe you're a doctor, or maybe you're in the construction industry or manufacturing or in retail, whatever the case might be, but you have subject matter expertise in a topic. And if so, you could be really driving that innovation for that startup. But there are others who are eminent mathematicians or been doing AI in the industry, and so you would want to get hands-on too, or you would just be a passive investor, right? And then the other thing is, of course, around which market you want to get into from a country perspective, and whether it is because you just have an idea, you want to just incubate it and test it out and prove it first, or you've already done that and you want to accelerate it to a market, right? So that becomes important. And then the last but not least would be then the industry domain, right? So maybe because you have acres of land that you've not been cultivating, and or friends who have been exploring agrotech, or when you look at the success of Byju's or other companies out there in education, and a state like Kerala, that being very, very important, then what about edutech, or various aspects of healthcare. And as we all know, Kerala is #1 in India for healthcare. So what is the innovation you can bring around there? Or maybe it is in the area of smart cities or construction. I think, Shanti, I believe, talked about public safety and, how AI can be applied there. Or like the conversation Ambika had in space, where, oh my gosh, I remember when I started doing AI first, probably around 30 years back, was initially in aerospace, because there was a lot of data and insights around control systems available for us to actually apply and show and make a difference. Or maybe it is in fashion, right? And we have a startup actually doing that. So the key point here is that, the purpose is important. What role you want to play will be very important. And then, as you can imagine, which industry and the market you want to incubate or accelerate, it becomes important. So given that, then when we think about making it real, the first question immediately is, gee, there's always this debate, what really is intelligence, right? Because we talk of artificial intelligence because you're short of intelligence or what, right? So in that regard, I think 2 points, right? One, there are definitions out there, right? And one of the common definition is about our ability to perceive or infer information and to retain it as knowledge, which you can apply it, for adaptive behavior, right? And there is always a context and environment around which you do that. But increasingly, there is a recognition that when you think of intelligence, it is not just one thing, right? And one of the latest articles that came out, I think it was in CNBC, someone was sharing this view about 8 aspects of intelligence that is important. And you will see this actually when you look at success stories in applying AI. You will see that maybe it is using robotics, maybe it is in natural language processing, right? Maybe it is in computer vision, in autonomous driving vehicles, or it is Alexa, right? Or Cortana or Siri. So there is definitely a reflection of that in terms of how the industry is progressing. But the key takeaway, in my opinion, is that it is important to understand that there are various dimensions to it that you should appreciate. And so when we have that as a definition of intelligence, then the question is, what is artificial intelligence, right? So again, there are different definitions whenever we get together to talk about whether it is the mind or the body. 30 years back when we were helping a university in the US establish a cognitive science department, we used to do this seminar series once every 2 weeks. And it was quite interesting because the people who came in there were mathematicians, computer scientists, philosophers, psychologists, neuroscientists, medical doctors. They were all coming together to understand and appreciate the brain and our mind, and how we could mimic some aspect of it and provide value. But increasingly, our recognition is that when we think of AI, sure, it is getting a computer to do things which, when done by us, are said to involve intelligence. But there is a reality check that just going and taking an algorithm and saying, hey, I got AI alone doesn't cut it. You want to appreciate and understand the mind and the body aspects of it, because there is always some R&D that is going to happen. So in that context, when you think about the mind, there are, again, models out there, right, in terms of how we think from a conscious situation all the way to preconscious and subconscious mind, and then what we do around that. Similarly, when you think about the brain and the gut and the spine, they all needs to come together. As you know, when we were studying AI, it was more about the brain, but increasingly there is recognition about the gut and the microbiomes that needs to come together, right? So there is a lot of appreciation of how our human systems and human intelligence evolves and works, which needs to be appreciated. And then we come to the machine, right? This is where we have various breakthroughs and letdowns and challenges of various technologies that has evolved, right? And if you look at this journey, at a highest level, you would see some kind of a sinusoidal wave around how the connectionist movement with neurons and neural networks were very popular. And then the what we call the subsymbolic kind of space. And then the symbolic space around fuzzy systems and logic. Those kind of things were emerged, and that is where like expert systems emerged. I was fortunate to start AI. I was introduced to that in I would say in 1990 when I started my grad school here in the US. But then had a chance to work with many of the leaders in this field, but not just those who like a Hinton who or Verbose who was very active in neural net, but also like the Lord V. Zadeh, who was the founder of Fuzzy Logic, and people who had invented and innovated in genetic algorithms, and people who are into integer programming, and the mathematicians, and people who have been looking at chaos theory and decision sciences, because these were all important elements that needed to come together. So given that, then the next question is, sure, we understand about intelligence, we understand what AI is about, and what are different, technologies that comes together to provide that artificial intelligence. Then, okay, so why should we care about it, right? So one thing for sure is that, and there is a increasing consensus about it, that how we do and make decisions will never be the same again because of how we can leverage AI. So there are a lot of numbers out there in terms of market and size and growth. They are in the order of trillions of dollars. So at some point I start counting, other than pointing you to data which is available. And then there is also a hype cycle for AI that Gartner, one of the industry, popular industry analysts, those guys publish, that also gives you a window into kind of what is emerging. The typical thing about the hype cycle, where there is always that path where new innovations will ride, and people will bet if you want to take risk. But then some of them, as you come down the trough of disillusionment, will fade away, or get the reality check of what will really work or not. And then it stabilizes, right, into this plateau of productivity. So there is a pipeline of a lot of innovation around AI out there. Again, that'll be mindful. You got to be mindful about and leverage depending upon your risk-taking, appetite, and then leverage it. So the other reason why AI matters is there is actually a lot of data out there around, again, market-wise, what could be the impact, right? So this is an example of that. The 21 technologies for 2021, it says that AI impact is around 390 billion, but they also say that AI will enable 80% of this emerging tech, like this year. So that is like a very big statement, and that is becoming real. And if you look at the inset on the bottom right, this is specifically in terms of the India market, right, where already there is amazing attraction and investments happening, and a lot more to happen. So the other reason why I think, when we think about why AI matters specifically to India, is definitely, when you look at the numbers, you're talking of adding like $1 trillion in the Indian economy by 2035. That is one of the predictions. And Stanford University, they publish this what they call an AI index score, and they published it recently, like in 2021, based on the data from 2020. And this is positioning India in a very favorable way. And similarly, NASSCOM also had a bunch of publications about the opportunity for AI in India, which again are big numbers and pretty exciting. And then there is a related question: is India really serious about AI, right? So, and you may find this, and many of you might be already knowing about it, but there is a national strategy for AI that was published in 2018. There are a lot of activities around by Niti Aayog around this, and then many of the multinational companies have been doing a lot of innovation, and so have been a lot of domestic startups, and the DRDOs in India and other educational institutions have been very, very active in that regard. So when you think about AI and think about the problems it can solve, I think there are various aspects of that, right? Whether it is a recommendation problem, whether based on like an Amazon kind of an experience, whether it is in being able to classify, whether it is documents or people or items, whether it is in terms of automation, like robotic process automation, or other ways to automate our business processes, the prediction problems, different ways to do learning, computer vision associated problems, being able to use natural language processing to provide a Q&A kind of interactions, like using a chatbot or a virtual agent, summarization kind of problems, and then of course speech related things, decision-making related things, control problems. These are all areas where a lot of success have happened already in using AI. Now, what is also emerging, and not because it is not there already, but there is a lot of excitement increasingly, is around how I can embed AI in a device at the edge, or within systems, whether it is in nanotechnology or otherwise. There is an emerging field of how you would use AI to do what is called AI ops, which is like, when you do operations, leveraging AI so that you can predict whether it is failure or issues that may come up and take corrective action accordingly, in a timely manner. And that gets into what we call situational awareness. And ML ops, which is like machine learning ops. So this gets into, as you build these AI models, there's a lot of them that'll be out there. You got to manage all that. So there is a lot of focus around that. And then, given to solve a problem, you will see soon in my presentation, there are so many algorithms and innovations that is happening worldwide. So there is this field of what we call auto machine learning that gets into, can the system go figure out for a given problem, apply a whole bunch of algorithms and tell me which one is best, right? So these are some of the newer innovations out there. So given all that, when we think of use cases, again, so many ways to talk about it and explore it. I can spend, ages, discussing this. But in our experience, at least these 5 stands out, right? One is all around decision support. So whether it is in figuring out the price of something, or managing my inventory, or figuring out which advertisement to push when I do the marketing campaign, or in doing risk mitigation, or maybe it is in figuring out which one to select and recommend. Maybe it is around what to purchase. It could be around clinical decision support, where a doctor, maybe in the rural area, you don't have access to a specialist. So can I just use AI system to give me a kind of a quick recommendation on what could be the problem reading a X-ray image or a CT scan or whatever. And already there are companies doing that in India, right, successfully. And similarly, if you look at the pharmaceutical world, what we call real world evidence. So looking at, given a drug, it is in market, but based on how people are using it and the side effects and maybe new ideas that may come out of it, how do we take all that data and generate insights from that? So decision support is a pretty big area, but then a lot of interesting successes, a lot of challenges too, but a whole bunch of use cases out there around that. The second thing, one is around radical personalization. So this gets into, based on my data, how much can the system know about me, so it can build the right context so that it can give me it can personalize, whether it is a recommendation or like a best fit offer, or the question the system will ask me or should not ask me, like in conversational AI, for example, or figuring out based on my sentiment and behavior, etc., how to understand more about me so you can interact appropriately. So again, a lot of innovation happening there, right? The third area is on productivity. So this gets into, there are mundane tasks we do, and which I could automate, and that is what computers do for you. But then when you think about, for example, processes you execute, where today I have to log into 5 different systems, go search and pull out some document, and then read the document, pull 2-3 data points from there, load it into a spreadsheet, and then do some compute with that, and then submit it somewhere else, right? That is what robotic process automation is all about, right? But then there is also the robots, right? Whether it is the robot that is doing work in the industry versus helping me because my mom is alone at home. That is like the Android Kunjapan kind of storyline, right? those are all getting real. And then in terms of a broader area where you would make impact is when you combine AI with other technologies, whether it is around Internet of Things. So you can get data from a variety of devices, and then you apply your AI algorithm to predict or make suggestions or changes or control something. Maybe it is because I'm able to put the AI, to use the NVIDIA or like an Intel chip and put the AI power right in my iPhone, or gee, maybe it is into the nanotechnology small camera that that during a health kind of a diagnosis that I would swallow, and it will figure out what is happening in my intestine, right? Those kind of things. And also increasingly you will see, right, like companies like Unity, for example, AI is like a very core capability within that in how you would build games. And whether it is for just general games or serious gaming, like, prediction markets, for example, where you're kind of using, or fantasy football, right, or fantasy cricket for that matter, where you're using people's intelligence globally to then get insights that can be applied, right, in the real world. And then gamification strategies, combining AI with augmented reality. These are all things out there today. And then situational awareness, right? I think Shandi in her presentation had talked some about this, where when you think about a pattern you're familiar with, but if there is a deviation to the pattern, then the system being able to predict that and alert you, not just saying, hey, you got to do something, telling you why I'm alerting you, and here are 3 potential things you can do about it. So variety of use cases, and then there are a few examples I will go to, specifically in healthcare, agrotech, and education that might be useful. And here is another way also. So Anand, one of our stars, he has spent decades in AI, and he had presented about, again, various ways of using AI in different domains like healthcare, safety, environment, etc. Again, a lot of use cases. So the other way to think about it is also, where is money going, right? So this is an interesting insight, I thought, that was published recently. When you look at comparing like 2019 to 2020, a lot of money has gone into drug discovery, cancer, that domain, and healthcare. Similarly, a lot more money compared to 2019 has gone into edutech, right? And then of course, in many areas, including core technology around, speech recognition, computer interaction, dialogue, etc. So when you look at AI in healthcare, around the continuum of care, NASSCOM had published a very interesting, article that talks about 3 areas where there could be huge impact. One is around enhancing quality, then about improving accessibility, and then reducing costs. So the whole bunch of use cases around that, right, that can be leveraged. But if you're interested in healthcare, one book I would strongly recommend you buy and read is Deep Medicine. So Dr. Eric Topol, he is a medical doctor who did this work. And I think the introduction is given by Dr. Abraham Verghese from Stanford. And this tells you the story where healthcare is going, leveraging AI. It's a phenomenal book. And in edutech, I think there are a whole bunch of opportunities. I saw this recent interview with Ravindran, right, the founder of Byju's, where he talks about student-to-student learning and engagement, which is so critical. And I think it is a very interesting opportunity to apply AI. So whether it is around figuring out for a given student which pedagogy will make sense, or helping them navigate through learning pathways depending upon how fast or slow or different modalities they learn, these are all opportunities in education. And agrotech is quite exciting. We have actually one of the startup, Agdi, which is kind of hitting headlines now, where they spend a lot of time looking at how to go figure out the quality of the seeds using computer vision and associated technologies. And here is another one in fashion tech, whether it is around, people trying on virtually, clothing, getting recommendations based on an occasion, what dress you need to wear, leveraging, data from across, from different sources, and then using that to improve the recommendation. These are all happening right now. So having said all this, there are so many use cases where you can apply, and now you say, okay, I have an idea. What should I be thinking about, right? Now, as a businessman or someone, there is already, standard things out there about what we say, the who, the what, the why, when, and how, what you got to figure out before you start a business, right? That is like, 101, right? But when you think about using AI, there is always some additional questions you want to think about, right? So what problem is AI going to solve, right? Is it an open challenge versus you see a low-hanging fruit where it's a proven thing, but you can apply it in this domain. Nobody has applied it before, right? Very easy, right? Let's just go get it done. And then there is always a question, do you have a solid business case? What is the agile process you would use to build the software? Often you got to factor in that there might be still some unknowns, and doing R&D in AI, be prepared for it, right? It may take you a little, some time. So there is always a strategy where you apply a known algorithm first and start seeing some sense of the data and results before you start doing R&D on figuring out and fine-tuning your algorithms. And then there is that question of, do you have the right talent mix, right? And where is the data coming from? So many of the algorithms in what we call supervised learning algorithms requires data, and it requires labeled data. And the quality of the data and all those things needs to be addressed, right? And then there is also that question of, gee, okay, I came up with an algorithm, how good it is. So what is exciting is that there are some amazing benchmarks out there right now. I remember when I started doing AI, like, in the early 1990s, we didn't have any of those, right? We were kind of figuring things out and actually setting up benchmarks ourselves. But today, there is some amazing, information available, and you can use those benchmarks and test drive your solutions and really figure out, right, where to improve. And then there are the usual questions, right? Do you have the domain knowledge? Do you have experts in your board or advisors that you can work with? Do you have sponsor users? If you are doing healthcare, can you get like a hospital in Kerala or wherever to be the sponsor user so you can pilot it there? What kind of partnerships do you need? Whether it is a digital university or other educational institutions, or maybe it is the banks, maybe it is some other company in the industry. How soon can you have a minimum viable product ready, right? And of course, the kind of the guideline of, you want to fail fast, right? If you're spending, putting money here, and or pivot to and navigate to a successful path if that is what is needed, right? So there are a bunch of approaches available, right? And I'm going to just flash it by you. Each of these topics takes days and weeks to cover, right? But when you think about AI toolkit, there are different types of algorithms and a lot of innovations out there, right? That you can apply. So whether it is using deep learning or recurrent neural networks or reinforcement learning or GANs or fuzzy logic or simulated annealing or genetic algorithms, these all will come together often to solve a problem. And talking of benchmarks, there are a few out there, right? One is called the super glue. What is crazy here is this is around NLP. And what you can see here is the super glue human baseline is like 89.8% score. And already you have like Microsoft's Deberta, as well as this T5 from Google that has been enhanced by this guy, Zuri Wang, that has outscored that. So that is how the innovation is going, right? And you can see Facebook's AI is down here right now. And similarly, there are others, like, Stanford has this thing called Squad, which is a set of Q&A that you would use to test out your algorithm specifically in NLP, but around question and answers, right? Again, in figuring out where you stand versus other innovations. Another one is ML Commons. So these guys have put together like a very large suite, and there is like, they publish the results, right? There are around 1,200 results out there of leading machine learning inference systems. And they also have this mobile performance app that very specifically applies benchmarks around your mobile based, device based innovation. And then there are other toolkits like this benchmark, they call AI benchmark. They have this 46 different computer vision tests you would perform, right? And you can download the benchmark and try it, and then calibrate where you land with your algorithm. So a whole bunch of things. And the other thing is all about the data, right? So often the challenge is that you don't know where I'm going to get the data. If you're in healthcare in the US market, it is like near to impossible to get approval to use data from hospital systems. But what is the good news here, right? There are strategies to work around it. Maybe it is in getting de-identified data. Now, an organization called MITRE Corporation is a federal organization, federal funded organization. They came up with a software called Cynthia, which can generate synthetic data. So for example, I live in Boston, Massachusetts. They have 1 million patient records of synthetic data, which represents a community of people living in Boston, but it's not really the data. And then there are strategies around self-supervised learning, few-shot learning, et cetera, that you can use, right, to overcome this data barrier. And then the other part is what kind of learning strategies you would use. Again, a whole bunch of things available. When you start on your journey, you'll pick and choose from those and make decisions. And then there's always a question, gee, how do I measure, right? How, is it working? So again, there are a lot of guidelines out there, whether it's around accuracy, precision, recall, false positives, ROC, so things like that, right, that you can apply for that. And then there is a question of how do I get the right talent? Again, different roles of people, that becomes important. Someone who understands strategy, someone who understands the algorithms, someone who understands the tools, who understands the data, and then of course the infrastructure. And then, gee, okay, that is all great, but where do I go get funding from, right? Again, what is exciting is that there's an India government site where they publish various VC firms and others who are investing in AI-focused innovation. So to conclude, right, I would say 3 takeaways. One is all about when you think about making a decision whether to start up or not, is it a for-profit thing versus a social entrepreneurship? You got to be thinking about what your role is, why are you doing it? Definitely, I think this is the time to act. And then to make it real, there is always this reality check that decision-making will never be the same again. A lot of it is because of the innovation happening in AI. So it is really a matter of finding a sweet spot and where you have knowledge in a given domain, and then investing there. And then in getting started, definitely spend time on your business case. Remember, AI projects are not your typical projects, whether it's in construction or software or whatever. There are some nuances to it you have to be mindful about. And you would rather fail fast or pivot. That is very important. So with that, let me stop and open it up for questions.
Thank you, sir. So there are many questions in the chat box. I will just read out to them. What is it that really excites you about AI? It's from Shanti ma'am.
So I think great question, Shanti. So I think the first thing is it always gives me a reality check in knowing how little I know about it. Right? That has been a reality check always. But the other thing is definitely I feel that we can actually make a difference in a variety of dimensions. And some of the domains I've been spending a lot of time is, for example, in healthcare, and I can see impact happening. We are seeing FDA that has approved almost 100 devices they call, which is actually software algorithms using AI. So that is the level of innovation it is happening in the industry, and I think you can make a very big global impact.
Yeah. Next question. 5 AI cases were shown in the PPT. So there must be something you commonly use, something that matures early in one area that can be transferred to another area quickly for faster innovation. So what is that?
Absolutely. And I don't think there is a one answer to it. You're right. There is always going to be opportunities. We have seen in the past where like deep learning, when it was initially applied in a particular domain, like, computer vision, now people are applying it in NLP and variety of other domains, right? And then applying, where there were, initially success in, say, some aspect of like image recognition, in studying X-ray images. Now it is being applied in CT scans and MRIs, and then anatomy, results, imaging, and then applying it to other domains like, look at agri-tech, right? In doing seed classification and recognizing which seeds are bad.
Okay, so which case has been successful in Indian economy and why?
Whole bunch. So if you think about just this, what I said, right, the healthcare. So there is a company, Cure.ai. The founder is a guy from Kerala, Prashant Warrior, right? They made some amazing inroads into applying AI in helping doctors diagnose effectively tuberculosis and a variety of other diseases. And I believe they did some piloting in Kerala, and I think in the Akshaya centers, and now they've gone global now. They've been funded by a bunch of venture capital companies in the US. That is just one example, right? There are hundreds of companies who have been successful in healthcare, in e-commerce. We have a bunch of startups who have been getting a lot of traction. Like whether it is like agri-tech, for example, and fintech for sure, right? And then there are some companies in core technology areas too. Like for example, in chatbot, there is a company in Cochin who has been very successful. The founders are based in San Francisco now, and they are delivering this solution to many banks, like that.
Yeah. So moving to the next question. In airports, are we using AI for identifying threats?
Hey, ACK is here, right? He should answer that, I think. But I know
that is his question.
Yeah, that's his question. Yeah. ACK, you want to answer?
Yeah, actually, we are using two types of artificial intelligence in the airport. One is mainly for identifying the threats, through the CCTV system, which has been suspected passenger movement or suspected baggage somewhere laying there, or that is to be detected in time, and that is to be removed from that spot. That is one. And artificial machine learning also, machine intelligence also we are using, especially for the CT-based CT scanning machines, where the first level detection is done by the machine, where if you suppose a threat or something like that. That is mainly software based, but with the hardware which is been detecting, and that will be interpreted and then identifying as a threat or not. These are the two types presently we are using, but there are some other even office in business intelligence and all that also have some applications.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, moving. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Antony, sir. Yeah. Okay, next question is there a big business opportunity around data annotation in India, like the call center business?
I believe so. And I think NASSCOM published a huge article about it, right? There is a phenomenal opportunity, right? Because without label data, it is not easy at all in many of the problems you're trying to solve. Now, people have been trying to innovate around it, like I talked about synthetic data, for example. And then other companies like there is a company based here in Boston, actually. Those guys have taken the strategy where they offer pathologists some incentive in coming and looking at the image and telling them, okay, this image means this disease, right? So that kind of tagging. And I think there's a huge opportunity, even if you pick a domain like that. Imagine the doctors in Kerala, right? What if they are incented to provide that annotation? That'll be huge, I think.
Yeah. And how close to creativity can we get through AI?
Good question. I don't know, there is increasing talk about, like the GPTs and, some of these newer algorithms. that is coming up with new things. But I don't know, it is tricky. I think it's not an easy question to answer, because creativity, on one hand, we as humans, we believe that is special for us, but based on our definition of creativity. But as you can imagine, right, like the same way they talk about how airplanes fly, it may not at all be how the birds fly, but it still flies, right? So you may find, I think, AI systems may be creative, but in a different way. Would it have intentionality? Would it have emotions? Those are all debates going on, right? But then they also say that if all my experiences are loaded into a system and help AI system represent that, then isn't that me, my digital twin, right? And if so, even if after I die, can I live? So I don't know. But systems can be creative in a narrow sense, I think, but in a broader human sense, probably AI is still as mature as a 3-year-old, I think.
Yeah. And any successful application of AI in media industry in India?
I don't know. I'm sure it is there, but I don't know specifics about in media. I know here in the US, there is a lot going on in the media industry, in, if nothing else, figuring out fake news, as well as in looking at trends. There is a lot. And then also in social media analysis and prediction and insertion strategies. And then when you get to marketing, a lot of things going on, right? But I'm not familiar with a specific success story in India.
Okay, so yeah, if there is any application of AI for mentally disabled child, can you share it?
I think there is a lot going on, what we call a differently abled child, right? Which is an important distinction, I think. I think in very, very specific areas, where, for example, autism, I think there's been a lot of breakthroughs there. Then if people have, like, how do you say that, challenges in walking or movements, right? There is some very innovative technology out there that allows you to combine like a robotics technology with augmented reality to overcome a lot of challenges. There's actually an Indian girl who is a founder of a startup based in Dallas in the US, who has been very successful in that regard. So I think there are definitely a lot of success stories there. Similarly, I think there is a lot of work going on around cognitive challenges of different kinds. It need not be always because you're young, but also as you age. There again, a lot of innovation going on.
But sir, how economical these applications will be for the common man to use?
I personally think that is where India can play an amazing role, and it is doing it already, right? In that what we call disruptive innovation, right? Where when someone builds a product that costs, or they charge you $100,000, we are able to come in with a solution for $5, right? That will solve the same problem. Now, of course, there are some barriers, as you know, when you use infrastructure, there is costs associated with that. But I think we have always proven to be successful in disruptive innovation. So I'm I bet that that will happen here also.
Yeah, okay, sir. Yeah, how about quasi AI to avoid accidents on roads rather than driverless cars?
I think both will happen, isn't it? But I remember when I think it was in 1991, we had an AI conference where they had a special committee I was asked to join, and that was at that time they were talking about intelligent vehicles and roads, because then the idea was to make the roads intelligent, right? By putting a whole bunch of sensors and using that as a way to provide intelligence to their vehicles. But now I think there is a lot more focus on the autonomous driving and the vehicle itself, right? But I think eventually, I think probably the success would be a combination of both, which will then mean that yeah, I'm having a driverless car, but even that needs to be safe, right? Or I'm still driving, but I'm assisted because there are spots, whether it is a blind spot or other situations where if I'm able to get that split second early warning, that will help me, right? So.
Yeah. Sir, can you also mention some of the disadvantages of AI in trading markets, of using them in trading markets?
Well, I think any technology, you got to be very prudent when you use it, right? I know that, like, again, back in the 90s, I had a AI startup company. We had around 100 clients then, and there were many who were actually in the financial sector using it in trading, right? But then the success stories will never be will be shared, right? Because they're all making money, and they don't want, if everybody uses the same technology, then they won't get to make money, right? So, but I think I think that there is always that thing about, like, the downside being, if you kind of work the system or do the illegal things, right? There is always a danger. But that thing, I think, applies to any technology, really. So is there something AI specific that I'll be worried about? No. Now, again, remember, the AI ethics, diversity, making sure that the system is not discriminating. Those are all topics of importance that people are already adopting, right? And many of it is really driven by availability of data and building the right algorithms. So that is what I would think.
Yeah, that was a great discussion, sir. So I think I've covered all the questions which are in the chat box. It was really enlightening talk by you. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So now I invite Mr. A. Suhair for vote of thanks.
I hope I am audible.
Yes. Yes.
It's time for formal vote of thanks, and I'm really happy to do it. Good day to all. The Intersociety webinar talks held on every Wednesday under the aegis of IEEE Kerala, IE Kerala, ISOC, CSI, PMI, Vakkom Foundation Trust, IEEE EMBS, and LMAC have been expanding the frontiers of our knowledge and understanding. We have a global audience waiting to get charged with new ideas every week. I think the success of this program is the spirit of the participants who register in large numbers from several countries and try to attend it as much as possible. We are truly indebted to all of you for this support and goodwill. Eji Harindulal, who is brilliantly coordinating this program, picks up the best speakers and topics of contemporary importance. It's not an easy job. Thanks to him for his perseverance and commitment. Today's topic covers two domains, artificial intelligence and startups, which are really the buzzwords of today. The speaker of the day, Antony Satyadas, is undoubtedly a doyen in this area. He has given a brilliant treatise on the subject with beautiful illustrative diagrams and explanations. The presentations were really charming. I was very much impressed. Just to look at this is any technical presentation supported by an elegant slides. It's captivating. Really great. Really great. AI, robotics, IoT, big data, 5G, blockchain, etc., transforming the world, making it really very smart. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us with the latest in the subject. In appreciation of your beautiful presentation, we present you a memento. Kindly accept this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We have a brilliant team supporting this event. MC Elizabeth George, Ajina Karim couldn't participate, I believe. And Shanti Ravindran had brilliantly introduced the speaker. And we see a lineup of great speakers from 84 CET 84 batch, starting with the Son. And we had seen Nair from Sial, Shanti Ravindran from Motorola, Lalitambika of ISRO, and now Antony Satyadas. You make us really proud of your achievements in different spheres. Thank you very much. So, thanking all of you once again for participating and making this event successful. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Next weekly webinar series will be on managing energy and environment transition by Mr. A.M. Narayanan, energy professional. It will be held on 24th March from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Thank you all for today. Have a great week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you, Antony. Thank you, Antony.
Hey, thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Shanti, S.K. Nair, for your presence. Thank you, Suhail.
Thank you, Harindra sir.
See you next week. Good night to all.